Okay, welcome everybody. So this series will be called Cosmology of Change and start with the first chapter on the cosmology of movement. What are movements? How do they arise or appear? How are they created, changed? How do they affect things? This part on the cosmology of movement will start with a brief definition of what is change and what is movement, and what's implied when you mention change and movement. So first, to have change, you need to have something to change. So the prerequisite of change is what we'll call beingness or beings, existence. So the common cosmology of many cultures would describe a primal void or chaos giving rise to creation, the unity of the manifested in more esoteric terms. This division of a world between pre-existing emptiness, that's the background for all things, and relative fullness, that is the manifestation of things, may seem completely strange in a video discussing martial arts, movement arts, and practical applications. But as we'll see, they weave together these stories completely with practices. We find this basic duality replayed again and again at various scales. In a discussion concerning change and movement, emptiness, the relative emptiness, is called in the manifested world space. And the background, it forms the background for the existing objects or beings that move through space and change through space. Movement is just one category of change. It's a change in the frame of reference, of space basically, and eventually of time, as we'll see. So the first three categories that we'll use to describe change will be form, movement, and function. The idea is change in itself is a process, it's not a thing. It's something that's being done. It's a verb in language, for instance. A verb on its own doesn't act. It needs a subject and an object. The subjects are the beings, and the objects are the beings too. The background, like the circumstances that you'd find in grammar, in the circumstantial complements, space and time can be circumstances perceived. You can move in space, but you always move relative to a frame of reference of beingness. You move closer to something, you move away from something. So this seemingly unrelated theme of mythology or cosmology links directly to the practical applications that we'll find. This duality, emptiness, fullness, nothingness, beingness, is repeated again and again. Void, chaos. Chaos would be fullness of change. Void would be absence of change. So now, the first categories that we call form can be used in several acceptions, several meanings of a word. Forms can relate at a broader scale to beingness, such as sin, in the quote, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. And then it can be used more specifically later as one subcomponent of one subcategory describing these actual beings. So the shape would be the external appearance of a being that's created or backed by its internal structure. So movement, self-explanatory. Forms relate to beings. Movement relate to changes that can happen only in a relative void, a relative emptiness. And functions relate to the goals or telos, which would be linked directly to perceived states in the future that are sought after, and the means to reach them, which would be perceived potential movements that could lead to goals or to destinations. This framework for movement function is very common. It's one of the most common frameworks used in design. All types of design, be them permaculture design, industrial design, or design of art, or anything. The idea that the shapes of things create or make possible certain types of movements or influence certain types of movements. Another word for movement could be actions too. And these actions generate change that can lead to something we want to make or we want to do, which would be the meaning behind the word function. So now, if we take the next scale and go into a study of the forms and movements, we'll use three first categories that once again mirror the big stories of the cosmologies. The first category will be called shape, second directions, and the third density. They all relate to this fullness, emptiness story. Shapes will be divided in three, to start with, three basic categories: flat, convex or hill-shaped or mountain-shaped, concave, hollows, valley-shaped. These three types of shapes make possible certain types of movements, and these movements allow for certain types of functions. A hollow shape can be filled. It can receive. A hollow shape can be defined as an emptying of a flat shape that's full below. So this is the horizon of the soil, of the ground. I want to create any type of ditch or pond or anything. I start from the horizon and I hollow it. The next shape is the reverse. I start from the horizon and I fill it. So this will be what I do to create walls, burns, any type of convex shape. And the third type, I start from whatever shape and I flatten it. These three types of shapes will relate directly to three functions. A shape that's hollowing out can receive. it's hollowing out relative to an incoming force, so it's relative always to an incident vector, incident angle. 90 degrees, I follow the point of contact recedes and I receive. 90 degrees, the point of contact goes against the ball and I emit. If it goes in the other direction, we'll say that I deflect. And the last category that I've not mentioned, if the interaction changes not the movement of the incoming object, such as seen in deflection, but if it changes the shape, we call it transformation, which would be a fourth category. So now to receive, I create a hollow shape, concave shape. To emit, I create a convex shape, as seen like this. To spread or distribute, I create a flat shape. So there we see again, the concept is not so much to have a flat shape. Having a flat shape won't change much, it's pretty much the same as having a full shape. But having a shape that's drawing or creating a plane surface, this will redirect the energy in all directions and spread it. It's the same way water is falling on the ground. You have a flat shape, it will distribute equally on all the area that's at the same level. If you have a hollow shape, it will concentrate towards the lowest point. If you have a convex shape, the part that has a vector force going against the direction, incoming direction, will bounce back, will oppose and sort of reflect part of the incoming energy, and the rest will be deflected by its sides. So now this is what relates to shape. When I receive, it can be seen that I can create a shape while going forward. The shape is receiving, but the movement and direction are opposing. They're emitting, sending away from. To receive, even if I do not change the shape, I can just go back until the energy of the incoming force is spent. So it's following the movement to receive, going against the movement to oppose. Emission against emission is called opposition. And then if I go into any other directions, I deflect, or if I do not interact, I dodge or evade. The third category that I want to mention here is the relative density. So it's the density can be described as the amount of fullness relative to the amount of emptiness. So now, if I have an incoming force and it meets nothing, it can go through very easily. If it meets, say, like there's one small piece of fullness, it will most likely cross through, even though it can interact a bit. If it meets something that's smaller than its size, the mesh of the net will stop it. So this will be what happens when you apply pressure on your belly, and then you tighten your muscle, you bring the fibers close together, and it pushes back the fingers. The reverse would be you tighten your belly and suddenly you release and the fingers go in. So this relates to the third aspect, density, and we'll weave them together later on. Form, direction, density. Thanks for watching.